In this video, we're going to take a closer look at those tabs at the top of a case. For the sake of continuity, I'm going to start with the same case that we've been using. But after a quick look there, I'm going to switch over and use one or two other cases that actually have more to show you, and so I can demonstrate how you use those tabs a little better. Now, that'll seem like a pretty short video, but in the next video, we're going to talk about validating case law, and you do that by using those tabs. If you don't remember what validating is, I suggest you go back to the print case research videos and re-watch the one on validating case law. And one more thing, I'm going to do these live, so there'll be a little less editing, but a lot more jumping around. It'll seem a little discombobulated, but I don't think it'll be a big problem. Okay, so here we are back at People versus Holtzman, and we're going to take a closer look at the tabs. Now, we've already looked at the Document tab, the Filings tab, and the Table of Authorities tab. So it's the three in the middle we're going to look at a little more closer. The Negative Treatments tab you'll see is grayed out here, and that's because there's been no negative treatment of this case. That's one of the reasons I'm going to switch over to different cases to demonstrate case validation to you. The second of the three that we're talking about here is the History tab. Now, the History tab for this case is extremely simple because it didn't really go anywhere. Now, you see here you have the choice of seeing a graphic or not, and this over here on the right is the graphic. You can click Hide if you don't want to see that. Most students I ever had liked the graphic, but without the graphic you can see just the one case listed, the case itself listed. What this is telling you is that People versus Holtzman, one of the parties, I assume Holtzman, asked the Court of Appeal to hear his appeal and was denied, which I'm kind of surprised because it was my understanding that everybody got one appeal to the Intermediate Appellate Court and that it was only the Court of Last Resort that could refuse to hear an appeal. But I don't know, it's California. California always has to be different. So this is basically telling you this case went nowhere. But if there had been other cases following it, they would have a different letter. So A is the main case. So when we get to some other cases, I will show you what a more complex history tab might look like. Now we'll go to the Citing References tab. This tab is going to be very important for your validating a case, but right now we're just going to take a quick look at it to see what do we have here and then how to maneuver around in it. This is basically citing everything that has cited your case, so anything that has cited People versus Holtzman. Over here on the left you can see that there are several categories. There's other cases, later cases. Obviously, no cases could cite it before it existed, so it's always going to be cases that happened after this case. It could be secondary sources. We have not covered secondary sources yet, but secondary sources are basically sources that talk about the primary sources. So you might have law review articles or a treatise, which just is a fancy word for a scholarly book. And there's one appellate court document here. Now, sometimes you'll have access through our account to appellate court documents, and sometimes you won't. You just have to click and see. So let's say we wanted to move around here, and you just want to see cases that have cited People versus Holtzman. Well, by clicking cases there, you have all the cases that have cited People versus Holtzman. Don't worry about what any of those little red flags or yellow flags mean yet. We'll get to that when we get to validating case law. Let's start to the left. You'll see treatment, and we will talk more about that when we talk about validating cases, but that's giving you a little hint of how each of these cases here looked at People versus Holtzman. So, for example, In re Marco R. examined People versus Holtzman. In re J.A. discussed People versus Holman, and so forth. Over on the right, we have a column that tells you the date of this later case. Here's the type, but you already know these are all cases. And then we have depth and the headnote numbers. Okay, rather than waste a lot of time trying to explain what these mean and how you use them in this tiny little case, I'm going to switch now to a case where a lot more happened. Okay, I'm going to start with this case primarily because it has a pretty cool history tab. And then I'll switch to another case to do some other parts. Now this case is called United States versus Hastings, but you'll notice there's a number of other defendants. So there's multiple defendants here: Gibson, Stewart, Williams, and Anderson. Let's look at the history tab. Down here at the bottom, you'll see in the A block is the case we were just looking at, U.S. v. Hastings. The parties, the defendants, lost, and 4 of them appear to have asked the U.S. Supreme Court to grant certiorari. Let's just hold our cursor over these granting. This one is granting certiorari. So Mr. Hastings raised an issue that the Supreme Court decided to hear, and it granted certiorari. However, Mr. Gibson, Mr. Williams, and this may have been a different Hastings. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and take another look at the name of the case. They were denied certiorari. So the case went up to the Supreme Court, and that's little box B. And as you can see here, the U.S. Supreme Court reversed the judgment of the court in the A block. So it was sent back down here to the 7th Circuit again in the C block on here, which made another decision on remand. So the case was on remand from the U.S. Supreme Court. And then it appears that they all once again asked the U.S. Supreme Court to grant certiorari, and they were all denied, and so that's the end of the case. I just noticed that this video is already 8 minutes long. I want to have plenty of time to show you how to use the filters to work your way through the citing references. So let's pretend the bell just rang and class is over. In the next video, I will pull up a case that has many citing references, and I'll show you how to use the filters. And then the next video after that, we'll see how to use all this information to validate your case law.